FPL is officially back today. So in today's video, I'm hopefully going to take you through everything that you need to know going into the upcoming deadline. Whether you've watched all of the preseason content or not, this is going to be your one-stop guide, your complete guide to FPL and Game Week 1. Who should you be picking? What are the big decisions people are looking to make? Who are the best players to buy in all of the positions? Who is predicted to do the best over the first few weeks? And how is my team lining up with just a few hours to go? What is up, everyone? FPL Harry here. Before we dive in, 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you're new around here as well. And I'm just going to get straight into this video. I appreciate yesterday that for some reason it took me an awful long time to actually get to the point of the video where I started talking about my team and there was lots of asks and you absolutely smashed it. So we're not going to mess about. We're just going to get straight in and we're going to start talking about it. Bukayo Saka and Arsenal is a big topic that I'm seeing in the comments of every video. When you look at the opening fixtures they do have, they don't look that good. And I think that is the real reason why people are not going there. But as we get later on in the video, we'll look particularly at predicted clean sheets. And Arsenal are actually second over the first 6, despite how bad some of their opening fixtures are. And Leeds at home in game week 2 is by far the best fixture that week, right? Because Spurs play Manchester City and Liverpool play Newcastle. So having Arsenal players in your team for game week 1 is something we really like. The issue with FPL this year is we just can't own everyone. And yes, I could want Bukayo Saka, and yes, I want Gabriel in my team, but I've got to pick and choose the moments where I go for one of these players in my lineup, and that is why at the moment I don't have Bukayo Saka or any Arsenal in my team. It is not because I don't think they'll perform well. It's not because I don't think they are good assets. I just think over the short term, for a cheaper price, there are players that I think maybe match those Arsenal players. Once their game week 7 fixtures come round that look really nice, I am categorically saying that I will look to be buying Arsenal players, particularly defensively. Also, if Gyökeres looks good. Also, if Bukayo Saka looks good. If Declan Rice is getting defensive contributions and attacking returns. There are so many Arsenal players I've got my eye on this season. I just think there are similar options that may be slightly cheaper that might be slightly better for the first few weeks. Next up, people have asked over and over again about those cheap midfielders, particularly Anderson, Reinders, and then Kieran Dewsbury-Hall, who has made his way into my most recent draft. What I would say is I think the 5.5 million options are much better, and there are also many more of them. So if you have a 5.5 in your team, it's much easier to go to another 5.5 million mid if one starts to do well. Whereas I look at my draft and I've got Dewsbury Hall, and if one of them 5.5 million mid starts to do really well, it's very difficult for me to get up to them. So I would go with a 5.5 if you've got the money and if you've got the structure to go and do it. Between Reinders and between Anderson, it really comes down to what type of manager you think you are and what is your patient appetite like as the game week goes on. If in game week 1 and 2, Anderson gets a 2-pointer and a 4-pointer from defensive contributions and Reinders starts both, and let's say he scores in one and blanks in the other, are you going to be able to hold firm that Reinders is still a minute's risk and Anderson is going to tick along? If you are happy to be patient, then the defensive contribution type player, whether it's Sarr at Spurs, who also looked good the other night, whether it's going with Anderson at Nottingham Forest, are the picks that you should go with. But the more I think about it, the more I think I wouldn't be able to hold firm. I'd look at Reinders doing well and I'd want to go there straight away. So if you actually just realistically think you wouldn't be able to hold firm and you'd want to go to the explosive asset, you should probably just start with one of the explosive assets and hope you get it right. So it kind of depends a little bit, but I do think the 5.5s are better than the 5 million for the start of the season. Next up is WIRTZ versus Bruno Fernandes. To be honest, Bruno is clear for me. Like we looked at it in yesterday's video. As I've said in that video, these videos are being sponsored by the FootMob app, and particularly with the defensive contributions that you can now track in the app. You can download it with the link in the description. We'll talk about it a couple more times during the video. I've been tracking Bruno. I've been looking at him last season, and his underlying data is so good. Like I look at the XG, I look at the XA that he gets in some of those games, the DEFCON he's getting. I just like the routes to points for Bruno. And I think it's the game week 1 fixture split that means WIRTZ looks better. WIRTZ has Bournemouth at home and Bruno has Arsenal. So yeah, WIRTZ definitely looks better. And I might go into game week 2 with WIRTZ, already 8-10 points ahead of Bruno, which doesn't feel great. But I still look at the first 3 games and think I still probably just about prefer to go with Bruno over WIRTZ. And then we're looking at the 7.5 million forward. So you've got someone like a João Pedro, you've got Mateta, you've got Solanke, who did return only off the bench, though, for Spurs on Wednesday evening against PSG. Personally, I think João Pedro is my current favourite. Mateta is next. I don't think you can pick Dominic Solanke because I'm not certain he's going to start Burnley at home. And if he doesn't start Burnley and then has Manchester City away in game week 2, then you don't really want that. Chris Wood is then probably third. But I do wonder, and when we get to my draft, I'm really considering having none of them and just downgrading to go for a 6 million striker, a 6.5 million striker, and if they are worth the money over them. But if I had to rank them, João Pedro is first, then it's Mateta, then it's Chris Wood, and then it is Dominic Solanke. Next up is the captaincy ranking for Game Week 1 that we will do every week. Now, we're going to start adding a few little bits of extra data. So we've got team goals that are projected. We've got the chance of them getting a return. We've got the form. Once the season starts, we'll have a look at who's the most informed player. We'll look at the predicted points, and we do have a captaincy poll, which I will put up on YouTube. I put it up yesterday. Thank you all for voting about who is going to be the most captain player, if that impacts your decision. Mo Salah is my number one captain. He's in the team that's predicted to score the most goals. He has the highest chance of scoring a goal percentage-wise, and he's predicted to score the most points, and he's the most captained as well. Outside of that, I do like Erling Haaland, Manchester City, predicted to score the second most goals. Cole Palmer is third. WIRTZ fourth. If you're not going Salah and you want to go with someone else, Palmer and WIRTZ I think are quite close, and then I'm going with Jared Bowen. If you've got a Cody Gakpo, I don't mind that, but Jared Bowen going up against Sunderland, but generally the majority of people are just on Mo Salah for that home fixture against Bournemouth. So with that, now let's start to have a look a bit broader with the players that you should maybe starting to pick. Looking at the opening 6 fixtures ranked by difficulty, again, we'll talk through this every single week. A video in one Wednesday, my transfer targets, and then in the complete guide, we will talk through this. So this is why someone like Newcastle and Arsenal in particular are quite low down. Now, Manchester United and Bruno Fernandes are also quite low down, which is why when you look at WIRTZ and Liverpool about halfway up the table, that does look quite good for the short term. My hope is, though, that we can get to about game week 6 when the United fixtures start to get better, and there isn't that much between them, because I do think the likes of defensive contributions for Bruno Fernandes is, a real plus to him. Up at the top, Chelsea are right up there, Aston Villa are right up there, and that is why in my draft, I've got João Pedro and Palmer, and I've also got Ollie Watkins and Morgan Rogers, because for the first 6 weeks, they are ranked of having the best fixtures. So if I am going to double up on any teams, I want to double up on the teams that I can just play all their players every single week and not worry that I'm going to have to sell them or buy them because their fixtures are not great or their fixtures are turning, because they're right up there. That is also why Forest are really popular, and that's also why Spurs are really popular, because their fixtures to start the season, apart from, one specific game for Spurs in game week 2 and Nottingham Forest against Arsenal, outside of those specific games, the fixtures to start the season are really, really nice. Then just looking at the data we've got from last season. So, of course, this is from last year, and you've also then got the newly promoted teams all at the bottom. I'm not going to put the newly promoted teams in the overall table because it would put Leeds as the 4th best defence in the league or something like that, because they did very well in the Championship, and same with Burnley and same with their attack. So they are all at the bottom. In terms of attacking data last year, Liverpool, Chelsea, City were the top 3. In terms of defensive data, Arsenal, Liverpool, Newcastle were top 3. Everton, Chelsea, Fulham were right up there. You can see the ones that maybe massively overperformed in terms of clean sheets, in terms of actual goals scored versus their underlying data that you've got there. There is some things that we do expect to massively change. Like I would expect Spurs to not be the 17th worst defense in the league. Yes, they conceded a couple of late goals to PSG during the week, but generally we expect a big improvement to them. There are probably some teams quite high up there that maybe Fulham, maybe Bournemouth in particular. We do expect to see a bit of a drop off as we get as the season starts and we go into this campaign. But it's just a useful understanding with what happened over the course of a whole season last year when trying to understand maybe what defenses you want versus what attacks you might like. And then just off the back of that, using the graphics we've got from Rob T FPL on Twitter in partner with the new very good Solio Analytics, which is free during the month of August if you want to have a look at them. Just predicting the clean sheets that we've got for the first 6 weeks. Now, of course, with data like this, because of defensive contributions, clean sheets are now not the be-all and end-all of defenders. But the key thing that stands out to me here is Arsenal. They're predicted to score the second most amount of clean sheets over the first 6 weeks. And then from game week 7, we're all going to want them. So it has posed a little bit of doubt in my mind that maybe we should just start with an Arsenal defender, get through the first 6 weeks, hope they keep 2, and hopefully they keep up to pace with some of the other defenders that other people are picking, like a Pedro Porro, like a Forest defence, and then actually just be ahead of the curve a little bit. But I do think with the likes of Nottingham Forest, their defensive contributions, with the likes of Porro, their attacking threat, There are a lot of other elements that start to feed into defenders now outside of clean sheets. It is just a little bit of a reminder, though, that the best teams will keep the best clean sheets over the season. And that is what we've got with Liverpool and Arsenal at the top. Neither of them are in my draft. Now, to have a general look at my top players to buy, we're going to do a bit of a broader discussion in just a moment. In goal, I like Sanchez the most, particularly because he's the easiest route into the Chelsea defence. None of them outside of Cucurella, who's 6 million being worth investing in. Sales is next up. Again, I like the Forest defenders. That's the issue with him, and that's why he's not above Sanchez. Verbruggen and Petrovic are probably my favourite 4.5s at the moment. I've got Kelleher in there. It sounds like he has been training this week, but there's no guarantee that he's definitely going to play the Forest game. So if you're going with Kelleher and Dubravka, I don't think you can do that for the start of the season. You can definitely have one of them, as long as the other one is a goalkeeper who's going to start in game week 1. Into defence, I have gone with Murillo in 1 instead of Milenkovic. I've just looked at the defensive contribution data. Again, I've been all over the FootMob app over the past few days, looking at some of their DEFCON from last season in specific matches to see how they came out. Pedro Porro is next. I've also, swapped in Murillo for Milenkovic in my draft, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Pedro Porro is next. Again, that game on Wednesday night, he was playing right wing back. He got an assist. He's not going to play right wing back every game, but he is on set pieces, and I do quite like him. I don't have other Spurs defenders in here, but I do think that Romero and I do think that Van de Ven are both worth picking. Of course, they both scored in that game and would have actually outscored Pedro Porro. So part of me does wonder about just going with one of them to save a bit of money. Virgil van Dijk is next. You can punt on Jeremy Frimpong. There was no real update on Connor Bradley during the press conferences, which was really strange. So we don't really have a timeline on him, which is probably good for Frimpong, or it could be the fact that Bradley is just absolutely fine and that he's already back. So I probably would go Van Dijk to be safe. Williams is next. I don't mind the double up. If I'm doubling up, I probably would go for Williams being slightly cheaper. And then Anderson and Richards are my favourite 4.5s at the moment, although they don't rotate well. So you kind of need to go for one and then another 4.5, like a Dorgu, like a Konza, like a Diouf. There are lots of good 4.5s at the moment. Into midfield, so this does exclude Mo Salah and Cole Palmer. They would be my number 1 and 2. I really like Bruno Fernandes, and as I said at the beginning, I do rate him just above WIRTZ. I think the route to points, the penalties, the some set pieces, the corners that Bruno has, plus the DEFCON means I just about prefer him. I don't think it's impossible I own both, but at the moment I've gone for Bruno and Rodgers to take a bit of money out of that. Rodgers, yellow flagged, was pictured in Aston Villa training on Wednesday, so he should be good to go for their game on Saturday morning against Newcastle, who look all over the place. And then they play Brentford, who look all over the place. And then they play Palace, a team who might not have Eze and Mark Guehi by the time we get to that. So there is a lot of positives for Aston Villa at the moment, plus the rest of the fixtures. I really like Rutter at Brighton at 6 million. If you can stretch up to him, I expect him to play quite a decent amount of minutes up front. And if Welbeck's not on the pitch, there's a chance he's on penalties for them as well. And then it's Anderson and Reinders. Both of them, I said, I'd probably put above going for Kieran Dewsbury-Hall. It depends your risk appetite. Anderson slightly safer, better long-term pick. Reinders more explosive, could make a mockery of his price, but also could get his minutes massively reduced. Once we move up front, Watkins is my number 1. João Pedro in at number 2, just above Mateta. I do think by about game week 4, though, we might look to swap between them, especially when Champions League starts for Chelsea. But of course, Mateta and Crystal Palace play 5 times between now and the international break because they have Europa Conference League qualifiers. Then it's Haaland. I don't mind him as a pick. He is still in my top 6 forwards, but I don't love the value that he takes up because I like Mo Salah so much and I don't want to draft with both of them in. Then we're going with Strand Larsen over Fulkrog. They're my favourite 2 cheaper ones. Welbeck doesn't feel nailed, and the other one is Barry at Everton. Now, Beto does sound like he is being told that he can leave, which could boost Barry to be a 6 million option that is going to start and one that we could potentially look at because the Everton fixtures are actually quite nice. But we haven't really seen him enough in pre-season to really want to do that. I think Strand Larsen and Fulkrog are probably the most reliable there. So what we're going to do in videos like this every single game week now is we're going to talk about press conferences, but we're also going to go through in this video and most of these videos, every team and just cover stuff off as quickly as possible. Most of the press conferences will be on Friday, so that we don't have that much detail in that during this video. Connor Bradley, there was no real ask about him, so we don't know. Jared Branthwaite is likely to be out, but we don't have an exact timeline yet. It is likely that O'Brien will play centre-back and they might put Patterson at right-back. I don't think you can pick Patterson or Keane. We don't know exactly who it's going to be. Christie, again, like I've been looking at his DEFCON data, again, in games last year that he started. It's quite difficult to track him over the season just because he didn't get that many minutes. But with Lewis Cook out, Christie's DEFCON when he played was really strong. And again, you can see that in the screen recording that I've got here. Kluivert hasn't returned to training yet. You can't pick him. Who knows what's going on with him there. Morgan Rogers has been pictured back. And Mark Guiu, there was a Sunderland press conference earlier today, but apparently there are quotes on him that are in the embargoed section. It might be out on Thursday evening. They might be out on Friday evening. The general report on Twitter, though, is it's quite positive that he might well be back and in the squad. I don't expect him to start, but it's probably positive enough for us to go with him at the start of the season. So let's rattle through every team and talk about as many of their assets that we can. I apologise if I miss some of them. At Liverpool, in goal, Alisson. For me, I don't like any of the 5-5 goalkeepers. In defence, I would go with Van Dijk. In midfield, I like WIRTZ. I like Gakpo for their price. And of course, Mo Salah as well. Ekitike, they're heavily linked with Isak. I still don't think it's something I'd do. Bournemouth, I don't think I'd really go there. If you want to go with Petrovic as your 4-5 keeper, that's about it. Semenyo, I just think their team looks all over the place to really be spending 7 million on him. At Villa, defensively, I do wonder if Luca Dean will play a lot of minutes at the start of the season, but with Maatsen there, it's probably not worth it. Konza is a fine, reliable pick. In midfield, Tielemans, if he's on corners, if he has penalties, he's a great pick because his DEFCON's not that bad, but I don't think we know reliably enough about penalties for us to go there. I, of course, love Morgan Rogers. I don't think I would punt Marlon now that they've signed the extra striker. I think he'll probably play the first couple, but I do think he'll be taken off early and his place will be in doubt. And of course, Ollie Watkins is my favourite forward. And Newcastle, it does look like Isak will leave. The only player I will have a look at them is Anthony Gordon, because if they don't, if he might be on penalties. He's on some corners as well. And at 7.5, he could be one to look at, but I still think they're all a wait and see for the start of the season. Brighton, Verbruggen I like at 4.5. De Krupje in defence I like at that price as well. Haven't spoken about him that much recently in pre-season. Into midfield, I like Belieber, although he is still heavily linked to Manchester United, which makes him a little bit uncertain. I really like Rutter at 6 million. You could go for Minte, but I would definitely go for Rutter. At Fulham, defensively, I really like Anderson. Into midfield, King at 4.5 is the best 4.5. They've been hyping him up on Twitter so much over the past couple of days. Wilson in that midfield spot as well looks very explosive, and I quite like Jimenez. And it does sound like Muniz might leave, but their opening fixtures are probably not good enough to go there. Spurs, we've spoken about. I really like all of the defenders. Again, from that match on Wednesday night, Porro, Van der Ven, Romero, all good picks at their price. I do wonder about just going for Van der Ven also on Spurs. Moving into midfield. So what was really interesting in that game on Wednesday is Kudus played as basically a second striker. And if they play as a back five, he could be the Mbomo that we had at Brentford last year. And at 6.5, he is definitely one I'm considering. His returns were just never reliable enough. And we didn't see massive shot volume or massive chances for him in that game. Like his XG that you can see there wasn't that high. So I don't love it quite as much. Burnley, only really Esteve. You could look at their left back Hartman as well, who is playing left wing back in some systems and getting far forward. But Esteve will be good for defensive contributions. Sunderland, it is only really Mark Guiu for me. You could go with Dinger in midfield, but I just don't really love it. At West Ham, Diouf is the one in defence. We don't know if Hermansen's definitely going to be ready as your 4.5 goalkeeper. Into midfield, Paqueta I like at 6 million. You could also have a look up front at Fulkrog and Bowen, both very good for their value. Wolves, Agbadou is great for defensive contributions, actually rotates quite well with Fulham. Into their midfield, no one really there unless you're going with Arias, their new signing, who could be on pens, and of course Strand Larsen up front. City, defensively, I would go Gvardiol if I was buying one. We don't quite know what's going on with their goalkeeper situation. Into midfield, it's probably Reinders or no one. And of course, up front, you could of course punt on Erling Haaland if you want there. And it's crazy to say he's a punt. Chelsea, Sanchez or Cucurella defensively. I'm not sure Cucurella is quite worth the money for the start of the season. In midfield, Enzo is fine at 6.5. Of course, I prefer Palmer and I do like João Pedro up front. The wingers are no-goes for me. At Palace, Henderson is 5, so I probably wouldn't do that. Defensively, I like Richards and I like Munoz. 4.5 for Richards is nice. Munoz is great for his 5.5 price. If they lose Mark Gay, though, what does that do to them defensively? Into midfield, if Eze goes, what does that do to them going forward? Sarr's underlying data is great, though. He's one of my favourite 6.5s. And then, of course, you've got Mateta up front, who I've spoken about. Forest, Sells is fine in goal. Defensively, you could practically pick any of them. I don't love Olareina because his DEFCON's not quite as good, but he does score goals. In midfield, I do like Elliot Anderson. Of course, you can go up front and buy Chris Wood as well. Brentford, apart from Kelleher, who is a doubt for game week 1, they feel like no-goes. Just they feel all over the place. Now, they might end up playing Thiago up front at 6 million, and it does sound like he'll start game week 1, but I'm just not sure I love it. I'm just not sure he's good enough at the moment. Man United, as I said, I like Dorgu in defence. In midfield, I like Bruno Fernandes, and that is about it. They're probably the only 2 Man United players I'd really consider. Arsenal, I like a lot of them. I like Gabriel, I like Rice, I like Saka, and I like Gyökeres, but I think there are other ones I'd rather target for the start of the season. Leeds have some nice cheap options. They've got Rodon and they've got Goodmanson as cheap defenders at 4 million if you want to go with them. Let's say you need a defender for game week 1, you're better off going Leeds over going Burnley, for an example. Up front, though, it does sound like they're going with and signing Calvert-Lewin, which is probably enough to put me off any of their other forwards as well. At Everton, defensively without Branthwaite, it does put me off a little bit. I still think Tarkowski is still a good pick. Into midfield, I like Dewsbury Hall and I like Iliman and Dye. I'm just not sure Iliman and Dye is worth the money over him. Grealish, we don't know if he's fully ready. And then up front, it's likely to be Barry now if Beto is likely to move. So that is all 20 clubs. Let's move on to the next bit. Now, looking specifically at game week 1, and this probably refers back to some of the captaincy, Liverpool predicted to score the most goals, along with Spurs, City, and Chelsea. For game week 1, those are the big bankers in terms of goals scored, and then clean sheet odds. You've got Spurs, you've got City, you've got Chelsea, and you've got Liverpool again. Basically, 4 teams are predicted to do well defensively and do well in terms of goals. So defenders and going forward and captaincy, those are the 4 teams you should be looking at. As a reminder, the sort of 40% benchmark is really what we look at for clean sheets. 30% up is kind of reliable, but anything under 30, you're basically chancing it on a clean sheet. So then going back to my team. Now, starting off in goal, I've still got Sanchez. Chelsea have been linked with a couple of goalkeepers like Donnarumma, which is putting a little bit of doubt in my mind, but I don't think we'll sign a keeper. Pedro Porro again played right wing back, but even without that, he was on set pieces. Like, they're going to score goals from set pieces, it feels like, this year, and I want Porro for that at the moment. Anderson is my 4.5. He was great for defensive contributions last year, really solid, and like the fixtures that they have in some of the weeks to rotate. I've changed Milenkovic for Murillo just because I do want a bit of DEFCON like beast in my team, and Murillo is definitely that. I know Milenkovic scored more goals, but Murillo was better for DEFCON. He's better for bonus, so I have gone with that over going with Milenkovic or Williams. Into my midfield. So as I said, Dewsbury Hall is my 5 million option in midfield. In their most recent preseason friendly that he did play, he only played 65 minutes, but he created 4 chances, 2 big chances, took some set pieces, had several touches in the opposition box as well. So if he does play number 10, he's a great option. My worry is that he might drop and play number 8. So I am wondering about that. Rodgers, as I said, pictured back in training. I love him at 7 million. Definitely done a U-turn on him. Fernandes, Palmer, Salah, Watkins, João Pedro. Things are almost the same as they were in my team selection video yesterday. It's just Murillo into Milenkovic. The big thing for me is Rodgers and João Pedro. And I think those are the big 2 things. I really like Rodgers. And I like, for example, it is that combination of João Pedro and Rodgers versus Fulkrog and WIRTZ. In underlying models, and if you look at anyone using a lot of data, WIRTZ is predicted to do so well, which is making me feel a little bit uneasy. But I just think that João Pedro Rodgers is probably a better combination than WIRTZ Fulkrog. But if I get to the end of Friday night and WIRTZ has scored and got an assist, and suddenly I'm looking at it 12 points down and value down already, I'll start to feel really uneasy on that, despite the fact that Liverpool then walk into Newcastle and Arsenal after that. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. I could just do, João Pedro down to a 6 million or 6.5 million forward and upgrade someone like a Rodgers. I could upgrade Dorgu. I could go to Gakpo, and I could upgrade a defender. So these are things that I'm looking at between now and the deadline. And the other one is Dewsbury Hall. I would love to free up money to go and buy Reinders, probably Reinders or Anderson. They're very, very close in my mind. It might depend on how many punts I've got. If the only punt I'm taking is that spot, I'd go Reinders. But if I've got someone like a João Pedro, who's maybe also a minutes risk, I might favor Anderson. But things are basically the same. I feel like I'm really, really close. It's just some of those final decisions. And I need to hear, of course, what Morgan Rodgers' update is in the press conference. If we hear that he's still a little bit of a doubt, as almost certainly I will not go with him. I don't think that will be the case. I think he'll be ready. He's a minutes monster. He plays so much. So I think I would go with him. But if there's any doubt from the press conference, Rodgers will be coming out and I'll find a way to upgrade him, probably to Gakpo, or probably all the way up to WIRTZ. And that is all for the complete guide. A reminder that all the screen recordings from this video is taken from FootMob. If you want to be the first to get your updates of the scores, if you want to be the one to track DEFCON, if you want to look at live XG and live XA during games, FootMob is the app that I will be using throughout the season to track scores live on my home screen before I don't even have to unlock my phone to look at DEFCON, to look at players' performances. That is the app that I will be using this season. You can download it for free, completely free. The link is in the description. It will also be pinned above as well if you want to have a look at it. But we will be doing the full 2-hour deadline stream, maybe even 2.5 hours, which is what I've put here for the Game Week 1 deadline, starting about 4 o'clock, where we'll look at any final decisions. We'll talk about my team. We'll answer your questions. I cannot wait to have the streams back. Honestly, thank you all so much for your support. Thank you all for your leaving the comments. I massively appreciate all of your support. 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you are new around here. Enjoy the final hours. Game Week 1 is back. FPL is officially back. And I will see you all very soon.